Well, welcome everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Derek Lovich. My wife and I own Freeport Wild Bird Supply here in Freeport, Maine, and we're sponsors of the Bradbury Mountain Spring Hawk Watch here at Bradbury Mountain State Park in Pownell, Maine.
Guinea birds today, Derek?
As I get tangled in my headphones here. Yep. It's all right. At least you have a better looking background than my face. All right.
What'd you see today
There we go.
out there?
Well, we had a couple hundred birds. We had several hundred broad-winged hawks and sharp-shinned hawks and ospreys. Those three are our biggest migrants right now. We're here up every day from March 15th to May 15th, doing an annual hawk watch that we've done for 16 years. Today, we're pleased to be participating in the 11th annual Feathers Over Freeport, a bird watching weekend. We're here this afternoon to bring you a fully COVID-safe keynote presentation about digiscoping, the art of taking photographs with a digital camera through a smartphone or a spotting scope. I'm actually using my smartphone adapter attached to a spotting scope right now to broadcast from the top of the mountain. This has been a really common question that we're getting at the store these days, is how to use our smartphone with our fine optics to take photos, to record special moments like a big hawk flight. And I can think of no better person to invite to join us today to teach us about this remarkable, successful, and yes, sometimes frustrating combination. Phonescoping and digiscoping, being one of our most frequent inquiries at the store, seemed like a good presentation offer today for everyone. So I welcome on loan from Kowa Sporting Optics, my good friend and colleague, Jeff Bouton. Jeff has spent his entire adult life working in the birding industry, first as a seasonal field research biologist across the US, when we have crossed paths first, then as a professional bird and wildlife guide. He's been an optics manufacturer representative for the past 16 years. Jeff now works for Kowa and is the sales and marketing manager for the nature markets in the Americas. Jeff, and I can attest to this, has made every possible mistake one can make in 20 plus years of digiscoping and is such an expert at troubleshooting and has simplified the learning curve for us all. Thank you, Jeff, for joining us. And without any further ado, the virtual floor is yours. Welcome, everyone.
Thanks, Derek. Appreciate it. And good to see you, if not in person. Of course, I'd love to be there with you, lifting bins and watching migrants stream across. But you know, such is the way of the new world right now. But you know, that's getting better too. I'm going to start off. I'm going to start a presentation here. I've thought about trying to do some live stuff, but candidly, it's very windy here, and I think there'd be some serious issues with audio. So I went back to old school, and we're just going to do a presentation. Let me pull this up. Let's share screen here. Give me one moment. There we go. All right. So welcome, as Derek said, everybody. Thanks for tuning in today. Yeah, you know, I've found ways to make digiscoping a lot less difficult and more user-friendly over the years. And I want to share some of the tips so that you can move on to enjoying and getting great digiscoped images. I don't even have a camera anymore. I'm just shooting, honestly, shooting with my phone and digiscoping adapter. So we're going to talk about that. But thanks again to my friends at the Freeport Wild Bird Supply for inviting me to speak at the great event. I made it up to the Freeport Feathers Over Freeport event one time, and hopefully we'll do it again soon. Anyway, no further ado, let's talk about what I like to call Kowascoping, in my case, using a Kowascope. Last year, as you know, a lot of us were locked down, and I had to kind of relearn how to not travel 20 to 30 weeks of the year and got to enjoy the year in my own backyard. So these are some of my favorite images taken in the yard last year with the iPhone through the spotting scope. And we're going to share the stories on how these came about a little more, but also how you can get some really good results as well in this presentation that I call Digiscoping Made Easy. So I guess the first step is, what is digiscoping? And Derek, of course, touched on that a little bit. Basically, it is the coupling of any imaging device, a smartphone, a tablet, a point and shoot camera, micro four thirds, or even a DSLR camera, and utilizing the massive magnification of a spotting scope to get these super telephoto lens equivalents, which we'll get into in just a bit as well. A little bit of a commercial for Kowa, and then I'll move on to just the standard stuff. Excuse me. We obviously have 7 lines of spotting scopes, actually starting at $350 and going all the way up to $3,000 here in the U.S. And we have adapters and accessories, probably the most complete line of adapters and accessories of any manufacturer to be able to utilize any of these tools behind a spotting scope effectively. In our line, we do have our Prominar series, which is our top end. Kowa's Prominar sub-brand, that represents our highest performing products. And the most popular, the 88 millimeter and the 55 millimeter at left and right, in that line, utilize a pure fluoride crystal lens element in the objective cell. And fluoride as a lens element has the unique ability to eliminate chromatic aberration, and by getting rid of that color fringing or ghosting around the edges, also gives you superior resolution of fine detail, which you can see. But don't take my word for it. You can also take a look at all the independent reviews. National Audubon Society recently did their spotting scope buying guide. And if you can just Google that online and see that the 88 millimeter Kowa scope was ranked the highest amongst almost 25 or 26 models, I can't remember, or 13 manufacturers, by 0.6 of a point. I mean, significantly over the rest of the field, is the best performer. The 77 millimeter was 1/100th of a point out of the second. At third place on our 55 millimeter scope, the 550, ranked 4th overall by score, but was the best scope under $2,000. So I feel we have great spotting scopes for digiscoping, but I think the industry agrees, and we do sell a great deal of them. If you have questions, of course, you can talk to Derek and Jeanette at Freeport Wild Bird Supply, or any of our other dealers for those from tuning in from elsewhere. But yeah, go ahead and check that out. So Kowa commercial over, we're going to move on to digiscoping. I thank you for letting me give a shout out to my sponsor here. The rig I'm using most of the time is the 88 millimeter scope. Our Kowa 883 is an angled 88 millimeter in the Prominar series. I use an iPhone 11 Pro Max with co-branded Kowa and phonescope adapter, and I'll get into why I think that's important in a bit. This combination gives me lens equivalents ranging from 700 all the way up to 3,360 millimeter lens. And that's the real beauty of digiscoping, is just the massive powers that you get. It's a curse and a blessing all at once, and we'll get into that as well, because it also brings a whole suite of different problems and challenges. So the iPhone 11 Pro Max, if you look at it here, has 3 different lenses. Most of the modern, newest models in the Samsung line, in iPhones, we're getting into almost invariably having these multiple lensed phones, which also, makes digiscoping a little more intricate, but also a lot more enjoyable. The quality of the images that you can get now, and utilizing these 2x lenses especially, is really a huge boon and a benefit to digiscoping. So prior to that, I had an older iPhone with just 1 lens, and a lot of people have that just 1 single lens phone. Typically that single lens is a wide angle lens. It's designed to give close-up portraiture and some wide angle scenic shots as well. In the case of the iPhone 11 Pro Max. It's a 28 millimeter. It's the one found at top on the left side. The 56 millimeter, the 2X lens, is found at the bottom on the left. And then the third lens on the right side, as we're facing the back, is a super telephoto lens. And that is actually not useful at all for digiscoping. So we don't really talk about that. But using the 2X lens at 56 millimeters behind an eyepiece that is 25 to 60 power, basically gives me the equivalent of a 3,360 millimeter lens. And the way we get to that is essentially you just magnify the millimeter focal length of the lens that you're using on your camera or phone by the power of magnification that you're shooting through the scope. So 56 times 60 equals 3360. So that's how we get to that. But massive telephoto, and far greater than any typical wildlife lens. You know, the typical wildlife lens is a 400 or 500, more rarely, millimeter lens that you see out there in the field. If you want to get really crazy, both our 88 and 77 millimeter model scopes, we can utilize a 1.6x extender, which changes this from a 40 to 95 power to 96 power of magnification on the scope. And you can see the math gets even crazier. At the low end would be an 1120 millimeter lens, but at the top over 5,700 millimeters in focal length. So again, when you consider a 400 or even a 500 millimeter lens, that's almost 12 times, 11 to 12 times more power than that. So most people think of spotting scopes in general and massive power for viewing long distances. And of course, you can look long distances and get pictures of objects quite a long distance away. You know, the moon is almost 240,000 miles from Earth. And, you know, we've got Jupiter is over 395, almost 396 million miles from Earth. Here it is with its moons, and Saturn, you know, over 841 million miles from Earth. So basically, as far as your eye can see is how far the scope's going to allow you to see. But a lot of people don't think of spotting scopes for up close. And, you know, it can offer fantastic detail at close range, even of very common and well-known birds, like this mourning dove. You know, you can see the individual feather tracks of all of the small body feathers here, and every wrinkle on the orbital ring around the eye. You know, it's a fun experience. Digiscoping and spotting scopes in general, I think, bring a whole different level of enjoyment to birding. So I've always carried one, actually. Here's a handful of just other pretty images I've gotten recently, just as examples within the last couple weeks. Here's a bank swallow. Didn't pose a real great challenge because it was exhausted having crossed the Gulf of Mexico. But I just like the angelic look of this little critter. Oops, excuse me. And cuckoos are coming through now, heading your way. You know, I'm down in Florida, obviously, so a ways away from you all. But here's yellow-billed and black-billed cuckoo, respectively, left and right. Lovely male cerulean warbler that poked his head out at me last weekend. And, you know, it's also can be used quite effectively to document rarities like this Western Spindalis, which I saw 2 weekends ago. So I didn't really dig too deep for pictures. This is my favorite picture that I took last year. And this particular photo of a green orchid bee captured in flight actually was taken with the small 55 millimeter scope, which weighs only 28 ounces. It's kind of you can fit it in the palm of your hand. So I know, of course, if we'd been up there, one of the highlights would be going to, you know, Wolf's Neck Woods State Park and looking at the ospreys that have, you know, just probably arrived and are starting their nesting up there. Couldn't do that, but happily here in Florida, of course, I do have a lot of osprey pictures shot through the scope. But that would have been a highlight. If we'd been there all doing this in person, we would have been there learning the digiscope underneath that nest probably, or across the way on the island. And Digiscoping is a great way to do that because it's so far away. But yeah, osprey, of course, are fantastic creatures and wonderful to a wonderful subject. So let's talk about some of the other advantages of Digiscoping. You know, one of the biggies is that power of magnification, and further what that allows you to do. This is sort of a graphic representation of a human at right with a 500 millimeter lens, and you know the approximate distance you'd need to be away from a standard 4 to 5 inch passerine to get a near full frame shot with a 500 millimeter lens. To the left is the 2-scale version of someone using a digiscope and a smartphone to get the same sized image. So one of the huge advantages is the ethical aspect of digiscoping. It allows you to stay much further away. You don't have to stalk or creep in on your subject. And one of the real neat things about that is when you get close to a bird, yes, you may get good images, but you are changing its behavior. The bird becomes wholly aware of you when you're having to stalk in and on them. And you may not get as natural of a behavior in your images using that smaller lens. So that's another nice advantage of a digiscoping rig. And a lot of photographers are actually starting to come around and add these as another tool in their bag of tricks. So when it all works right, you can get stunning images, of course, through digiscoping with great detail. But it doesn't always work. And when it doesn't, you have to become a photo detective. So what I want to do with you here is just talk about common photo fails, as I call them, of digiscoping, the various areas where it's real easy to make a mistake. And once you realize what these are and how to recognize them, then you can more quickly change your technique and move to getting a nice picture. So this was a gorgeous Kentucky warbler picture that I didn't get last spring. I think it's a classic photo fail, one of the few I didn't delete. So I use that as my backdrop for this. Some of the causes of the photo fails, probably in the order in which they occur. They're most commonly are alignment issues, and we'll get into that. There's motion blur and vibration is another big cause of failure. Missed focus, which I'll get into exactly what I mean by that in the next sections. Of course, exposure, glare and reflection, and finally atmosphere. These are the biggest things that mistakes that you can make when you're digiscoping, and the things that may keep you from getting a gorgeous photo. So we'll begin talking the most common one, and that's alignment issues. There's a lot of things that can go on with digiscoping. One of those is that you have to have the you have to get your camera lens, or be it phone or physical camera, centered perfectly over the tiny little circle of light coming out of the backside of the spotting scope, what we call the exit pupil coming out of the end of the eyepiece. And at times at full magnification, that can be maybe less than 2 millimeters wide that you're trying to get centered on. And if you've ever tried to handhold your camera behind a spotting scope, you can see just how the slightest bit of movement and you just sweep right past the circle of light very easily. So using an adapter is key here for success, but you can still get into alignment issues. And here's a graphic representation showing when we have when you're not square on the eyepiece. You can see that the phone here is cocked at an angle, and this is what it's going to look like on the screen. You're going to have that circle's not going to be centered, and you're going to have severe shadowing on one side because you're basically looking into the side wall of the eyepiece. So what do we want to do? We just square that up, and you'll find that that circle will be centered and nice for you. Here's some not graphic but actual images of what it looks like in the eyepiece also when you don't have the proper distance. So it's also, there's a three-dimensional component. Not only do you have to be centered side to side, up and down, and on the diagonals over that circle of light, but you also have to have the perfect distance between the lens on your camera or phone and the surface of the lens on the eyepiece. You know, that's basically your eye relief, it would be called. And you can do the same thing with your eyes. If you take a pair of binoculars as an example, and you twist down the eye cups and you jam them right up against your eyes without glasses, you can see some of these same effects, these sort of arced shadows, if you will. So at the left-hand side, here's an example of what it looks like when the two lenses get too close together at minimum power. At 60 power on the scope, you sort of get this crescent moon with this gradation of shadow, and it still kind of ruins the photo. However, when we pull the lens back, you'll get a really perfectly round circle that's got a nice crisp edge to it, as we see on the right-hand side, and the field will be completely flat with the same color. And a great way to test this, to find out the perfect sweet spot for your setup, is set it up right against either a bright white background, you know, a clean white wall, or a blue sky is a great way to test that and find out what's the proper distance for your specific phone and or camera on the eyepiece you are using with the specific adapter you're using, because it will vary with all those variables. So here's another graphic example of what we're talking about. When you get the lenses too close together, you can get, again, sort of this funky shadowing in the corners. It's an uneven light. And what we're going to want to do is roll that eyepiece, eye cup out, and that should clean that up. And once again, you'll get that nice clean circle around the outside without that shadowing in there. So that's the third part of the alignment issues, is getting it centered on the circle itself, make sure it's square. And then the third component of that is make sure you have the proper distance between the two lenses. And if you're seeing any of those, again, sort of crescent moon shaped arced shadowing, you're probably going to have to move the lens on your camera or phone further back off the eyepiece. Okay, so remember that. All right, so the other thing that happens, of course, when we first put the phones on with these 1x lenses in particular that are a wide angle, okay, zoom, whenever you have a lens on your camera or phone that has a wider angle of view than the eyepiece allows, you're going to get this, what we call the vignetted circle, that darkened circle wrapping the your subject, as you see on the graphic representation of this house sparrow. However, in this case, if you twist up the eyepiece zoom, you can eliminate all or most of that vignetting, depending on which eyepiece and which camera lens you're using, right? In this case, we still have a little bit maybe on the corners. So what you can do at that point is manipulate the digital zoom on the phone screen, you know, just expand your fingers a little bit to get rid of that, or you can just leave the shadowed edges in there and crop it out later. Either or, that's how you eliminate the vignetting. Now, I will say this is the most common scenario and what most people have probably run into in their digiscoping until the modern age of the 2x lens. One of the beauties of the 2x lens, and get in front of me here, which I've got here on the phone, is it's a 56 millimeter lens, which is not a wide angle field of view. That's the equivalent of basically 1x of magnification. It's very similar to what your eye will see at that. And when you're utilizing that 2x or, you know, more than 50 millimeter lens, when you put that on our eyepiece, especially this is a 25 to 60x wide angle eyepiece that we're utilizing on the 88 and 77 millimeter scope, there's no vignetting anywhere, whether at 25 power or 50 power of magnification. So basically you're getting double the magnification range you had without any loss of light per se. and you still have more zoom that you can utilize and without vignetting. So that's one of the huge advantages of using these new 2x lenses. Okay, so next step. What's wrong here? We take a look at this image and we see that nothing in the image is in focus. There's not a single point in this image that's focused. So as a photo detective, we immediately realize, okay, this is a vibration issue. When you have such massive magnification in particular, and if it's lower light as well, or you don't have a stable tripod, there's a lot of reasons for this. You get a little bit of vibration in there and it's just going to make the entire picture a blur. So this is a vibration issue. And due to this very common issue, it's really important that you have a real stable and sturdy tripod. It doesn't have to be the heaviest tripod in the world. I like lightweight tripods personally. You know, carbon fiber, sometimes even a 4 pound or less tripod I've used quite effectively, but it has to be able to lock down and hold the scope securely without vibration or rocking or any kind of chattery motion in there. Sometimes, you know, people have a 20-year-old tripod that really probably needs some work, you know, it's not in the best of shape, and it allows, you know, the scope to bounce around, and at these massive powers of magnification, that can look like an earthquake in there. The other thing that we already talked about is the importance of an adapter. Adapters do so many things for you. One is it makes things foolproof when utilized right. And I will tell you that I prefer adapters like this that are mated to a specific phone. Okay, and the reason I prefer these over, say, the many generic adapters out there is these universal adapters have to accommodate many different phones, sizes, shapes, and as such, they have extra adjustments that need to be made. This just is another source of error, basically, that can occur. They often suffer from repeatability in that things get bounced around. You have to recenter things each time you put them on. So they're not near as effective as something like these. This is a Kowa branded, co-branded phonescope model. I think Phonescope makes really good designs, and it's mated to this specific phone. Okay, the 11 Pro Max. And this ring, put it there, is perfectly mated to the diameter of the TE11Z, the Kowa TE11WZ eyepiece. In that way, when I mount this, put it together, I'm always perfectly centered when I slide it onto the spotting scope. And that's important when you're dealing with birds, especially. You may have mere seconds to get a photo before the thing flits off. So you have to be spot on, dummy proof, as I call it, you know, and that's why I prefer and recommend someone get an adapter that is mated to their phone on the specific eyepiece that they're using to eliminate those variables and the extra motion. Okay, now, even with that, sometimes you press the button and again, you get that vibration. So there's other things we can do. Older phones have, and newer phones still have these. You can go to like a 3-second delay, and here's a screenshot of that on an iPhone with a 3-second delay. Take the picture, bring your hands back, let the vibration end, and it will take the picture. There's of course a huge risk that the bird could fly and not be there in 3 seconds. So what else can you do? Well, you know, older phones, again, if you touch that button and held it down, it would actually shoot a burst of images. Modern phones now allow you to be able to shoot in live mode in the iPhone series, as an example, and that will take a short video, you know, with 12 frames maybe, and you can select one of those. So even if there's vibration at the beginning, by the end there may not be. I used to do that even before there was live frame or live view. You could press the shutter release and hold it down, and it would take a burst of photos. And again, there might be vibration when you first press the screen, but by the end, often it will have calmed down. One of the other kind of cheats that people use on iPhones is the volume button also, when you're in the photo mode, will take a picture. So if you have a pair of these earbuds that have a volume control built into the cable like this, you can just press on the volume control and use it like a wired shutter release to eliminate a lot of that vibration. And Samsung models, they also have a voice command where you can tell the camera to take a picture, and it will. But that may not be the best for birds. You know, especially if it's fairly close and you start talking out loud, you may scare the bird away. So another great option, again, Phonescope's a good company. They make these Bluetooth remote controls. I will say that I have no vested interest in Phonescope. I just think they make the best equipment from everything that I've used, and that's what they do. They do digiscoping with phones. I mean, that's what they do, and they do it better, I think, than anyone else. So that's why these companies have it. But it's I think it's a relatively inexpensive. You sync to the Bluetooth in your phone, you press the button on this wireless remote, and it will take images as well. Okay, let's move to the next photo fail. Well, it's not the next photo, the same photo fail, but another technique. We're talking mostly here about vibration in your system. However, in low lighting conditions, another problem is the bird may be moving. So you get motion blur based on the fact that the bird's moving. Either it's physically moving, or in this case, a small bird on a branch on a windy day that could be going up and down like this. And you just can't get a quick enough shutter speed to stop the motion. So one thing you can do is you can just reduce that zoom again, bring the zoom back down, because what you're doing, you're allowing more light to reach the sensor, and you will get a faster shutter speed. And of course, faster shutter speeds stop motion more effectively. And then you can crop that out later. And that's just one recent example that I took last weekend. It's not the best photo of this chipping sparrow, but just to give you an idea of that technique. And again, when everything comes together, you can actually get quite good photos. All right, another problem here. So again, initially you might think that this is a motion blur problem. But again, as a photo detective, now you start looking and you realize that up here, the branch moving up to the top right-hand side, I don't know if you can see my cursor on the screen, but this area is actually in perfect focus. It's that Kentucky warbler that's out of focus. So this is a common issue. You know, I refer to this as missed focus. And what's happened here, you've got mirror seconds, you put that on there, and the autofocus often is going to pick up the branches in the foreground rather than your subject, which is now in the background blurred out. Another Kentucky warbler here, missed opportunity. So here's another graphic example of what we're talking about. Bird in the background out of focus, and this little fern in the foreground is perfectly focused. You know, the autofocus has picked that up. Happily, you know, spotting scope photography is kind of forgiving. You don't have to remember, how do I get into manual focus mode or anything like that. As you do with a camera, you have a focus wheel on the spotting scope, and you can utilize that effectively to change your focal point and get your subject in focus rather than the leaf in front. One issue with that is, however, sometimes the phone will continue to want to recycle the autofocus point and will pick up that branch repeatedly. So what you may have to do in that is to lock or override the autofocus. And we'll give it again another graphic example how you would do that here. In this case, you would touch the screen and hold it down until you get this icon appear. And you can see at the top it says AE/AF lock. That's auto exposure and autofocus lock. Basically, wherever you touch the screen, it's going to focus and properly expose that area. And it will lock that point. So it won't try and search for focus or exposure. Now, at that point, you have the opportunity again to correct it if it's not right. This is a graphic representation, of course. You know, if I were to do this in the field, I would actually probably touch the bird's head or the eye in the bill, because that's where I want the sharp focus to be, and pick that as my focal point. But you get the idea. With that locked, now it's not going to, again, search. So you can go back to your focus wheel. And again, here, the Kowa Prominar series have the dual focus wheel. So it's just fingertip control, and you can utilize the outer wheel, which is a fine focus wheel. It's geared to allow real fine control of the focus, which is great for getting razor tack sharp images without vibrating the whole scope, because you're just using that wheel with your fingertip rather than grabbing the whole barrel and twisting it back and forth, which at high power can really shake everything and make it difficult to find focus if you have great magnification. I know some of my colleagues like to use a little loop with a shade on it in the field, like this. It's a magnifier to even take that another step, shade it, and you really can look at it, and you've got a magnifying loop on the top to see the screen even greater. Again, I know you were all concerned that I'd missed 2 Kentucky warbler shots. So here's a couple I got last weekend. Don't worry about me. I'll be just fine. But again, when it all comes together, you can get some really stunning images. And it's mind-boggling to me still daily. I just shake my head to think that I can do this with a phone, pull it out of my pocket and get images like this. Glare and reflection. So there's a couple things with glare and reflection. If you're using a mated adapter like this is going to fully shade the top of the eyepiece, so you won't get reflection as much. If you see any glare, it's going to be on the outer lens, and that's why all the scopes generally have a sunshade to pull out. If you are looking kind of at the sun at a low angle, you can get, or even side angle, you can get a reflection off the front. You pull out that sunshade and it will not allow the light to glare off sideways, off the front objective lens. But if you're hand holding or utilizing one of these universal adapters, often it doesn't completely shade the top of the eyepiece. So you can get what we see here. And if you look at the top left, you can actually see you're seeing the reflection of the branches above you are being reflected off the surface of the eyepiece. And in this case, if you see this, it's just a simple matter. Take your hand and kind of cover that top section. Just shade it while you're taking the photo, and you can eliminate that as well. All right, so let's talk about exposure compensation. As we noted before, on the iPhones, when we touch the screen and hold it down, we get this icon, and we essentially have locked the focal point, both for the focus and for the exposure. Now, if we don't like the exposure, in the same way that we could manually override the focus with the focus wheel on the spotting scope, now we can go to the phone. If we slide up and down on the screen, we can push upward to brighten the subject and slide back down to darken the subject to get the subject precisely exposed the way we want. So you have that ability very quickly at your fingertips, very easy, very intuitive with a phone. The last photo fail is atmosphere. And sometimes there's not much you can do with atmosphere. The beautiful thing about spotting scope photography and digiscoping is you have this massive power of magnification. The horrific part as well can be that you have this massive magnification, and it allows you to shoot subjects that are much further away. Unfortunately, there's not much you can do if you have bad air between you and your subject, be it fog, be it dust, be it moisture, or heat vibration coming off the land. So in this case, this was a bald eagle with some black vultures feeding on roadkill on the side of the road. I pulled over, I was shooting from my car. And as the land between me and the bird was heating up, we're getting that heat shimmer, that sort of vibrating haze. It dissipates as it gets higher in the air, but me sitting down in my car and having a low perspective on this, I just could not get an in-sharp picture, even though I was fairly close to the bird. I don't know if it would let me do this in this purpose or in this specific instance, excuse me. But one way to combat that would be to get higher. If I'd stood up and came down at a different angle, yes, I would have changed my perspective a little bit, but I may well have gotten less of that bad air between me and my subject. The other thing you can do, of course, is just shorten the distance between your subject. If it's a really, really long distance, if possible, you can get a little closer and eliminate that. But that's about all you can do with atmosphere, unfortunately. So let's talk about some other fun things that you can do with digiscoping that you may or may not know. So utilizing some third-party apps, and in particular Merlin. I don't know if hopefully you're all familiar with the Merlin app. It's a great resource. When you're digiscoping, especially, it's super easy. It's just one more step. You can snap a picture of a bird. If it's fairly decent image, you can open up the Merlin app, and then you can choose the photo already taken, or even take a new photo if it's a bird that's sitting there very well and in plain sight for you. Excuse me, I'm choking on a little something here. That's better. So, but I would recommend obviously taking the photo and then going back and identifying it afterwards, because again, as we've already said, birds may not sit for you, but you can do either or, and it works about the same. So you select the image that you just took, and it tells you to zoom up again with your fingers like this to fill the little circle. Once you get there, you hit next. Being on your phone, it knows the date and it knows the location that you're at. If that's correct, you can just hit identify. And in most cases, a decent picture, it'll give you the proper identity, which in this case, it tells you, okay, I've just taken a picture of a great crested flycatcher. So now you've got a tool at your fingertips that also helps you to identify the birds that you're photographing. Talked a little bit about the adapters. You know, we have this new phonescope adapter that we've got. It's a co-branded adapter. Here's a picture of the entire kit. So the kit that we're selling, it's $109 retail, is a phonescope adapter. It's been co-branded, it's special colored, but it also comes with 3 rings in it that will accommodate all of our spotting scope eyepieces, and even some of our most popular binocular rings in there as well, all in this one kit. So really all you have to do at this point is know what your phone is, and you just order the kit for your phone. You don't have to worry about any other aspect of that, and you get this foolproof kit that comes to you that'll work seamlessly out of the box. But what I was going to talk about, the other fun stuff, is by switching the rings. And this is, again, I'll pull this off. This is the ring I use for my spotting scope, and putting on the smaller ring here. This is the one that fits on my binocular. I can just stick this to my binocular. It'll stick right on, like you can see here in these images. And now this shoots the equivalent of like a 400 millimeter lens on an 8-power binocular. So again, you can put that in video mode and actually be following a flying bird. Derek out there on the hawk watch, if a bird were particularly close and moving fast, it'd be a lot easier maybe to get it in the phone than in the spotting scope with a lot more magnification, and follow it in video mode. And then you can actually pull out video stills later. Here's some examples of just taking snaps of a flying bird going overhead, which is a lot more complicated perhaps with a spotting scope and massive magnification. Swallow-tailed kites here in my backyard. So speaking of the backyard and going back to what we were talking about before, I want to talk about some of the changes in the technologies. Just like point and shoot cameras before them, and even DSLRs, but the turnaround on those is slower. These new phones, every successive generation just gets better and better and better with the imaging and with the capabilities that they have. And so obviously the 2 birds on the side are not something that you'd expect to see in Maine. If you did, I'm sure that would cause quite a stir for a painted bunting or a black whiskered vireo. But I'll talk to you specifically about stories behind each of these. But an eastern screech owl in the center, that's a fledgling eastern screech owl, you may. Now, if you may notice, that the pupils on that bird are almost entirely dilated. And that's because even though it looks like it's daylight there, this was barely light. This is at the first inkling just past the purpling of the sky in my backyard. And this was not taken with any light whatsoever. So we're before official sunrise. This bird's still a little bit active in my side lot of my house. And I put the phone on there, and utilizing the 1x lens, this only works on, the new night mode on these phones is incredible. What a resource. So with no flashlight on this bird's eye, I'm still at a fair distance away, utilizing that the night mode at 25x. So this was actually a vignetted circle originally, and I cropped it out after getting the picture. But you can see how crisp this was. It looks like it was taken in daylight. But as you can see from the pupils of that bird, had it been daylight, those would not have been dilated like that. It would have been much smaller. So that's a great tool that we didn't used to have in our bag of tricks. Now, the other two are actually video stills. So when you want to capture a specific behavior, as an example, one of the great things you can do is shoot in the highest resolution of video that these things allow and take a short video clip. The bird on the right, the painted bunting male, was not singing, although it looks like he was. He was actually kind of working up a pellet or something. I don't know what he was doing. So I just quickly switched to video mode. I was already photographing him and shot a short video, and I got the inside of his mouth, which was a great treat. The black-whiskered vireo on the left is a new bird for my yard. I was very excited. It was July, and I was in my house, and I literally heard the thing sing from the side lot of my yard. I didn't have any windows open or anything, but that's how loud it was. And I came running out, and I'm looking all over, and it sang again. I found it. And as I'm looking at it, I'm looking at how long the bill is, and it looks longer billed to me than the typical black-whiskered vireo we get breeding there. There are no breeding black-whiskered vireos anywhere in my county or really anywhere near me. And I know that there are other races from the Caribbean that would be vagrants that are much longer billed. So I wanted to get a picture of the length of that bill because it was just super abnormal in my experience to try and document that. So again, shoot a video and watching it as it's turning its head, turn, gets in profile, boom. That's the snap I captured. And as you might imagine, looking at this, you can see there's leaves covering that bird. So I found a little hole through the leaves. I selected its head by pressing on the screen so that it was focusing there, and readjusted the focus. And then I just hit the video. And especially on video, I think every 10 frames or something, it's going to want to auto search. So it's really important to remember to lock that focal point on a still bird if you're going to shoot a video of these critters. Okay, so that's some of the tips and tricks. Here's the adult owl, and maybe the same. There were 3 juveniles, so I don't know. Screech owls that same morning. They just came through one day. They were in there, and then they left again. So they were just passing through, foraging for food, I guess. But again, you can see the detail, the fine detail in almost no light whatsoever. Similar here, there's a little more light, but still give you an idea of some recent barred owl shots down the road in very low light. And of course, we talked about ospreys. So this is a great shot of an osprey, but again, it's a video still. I could try and show you this. Sometimes videos really don't work so well on Zoom, but you could see if that could work. I mean, we'll try that in a little bit. But basically, in this case, whoops, go back. You can see I'm slide that slider on the bottom back and forth just to find the frame that I want. And when shooting the highest resolution, very often each of the individual frames can be quite a lot of resolution, and then capture that. Here again is showing some various screen captures, stills, if you will, of the video of the black-whiskered vireo again. And that's all I've got to talk about there. Let me stop share. And hopefully you all learned some things. I don't know if there's any questions. We've got a Q&A function on here. You can drop any questions you may have in the Q&A box, and I will be happy to answer any of your questions. while I'm looking for that, I'm going to see if it will let me share a video. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Optimize for video clip. Okay, let's see if it will let me do this live for you. Okay. All right, hopefully you can all see this. But again, here's, you see I can move this slider around, and that's not quite sharp, not quite sharp. I could look for the frames that are specifically sharp in this video by dragging back and forth, and then select the ones I want. But you see it was a windy day. It was still very much, but I was able to go back and forth and find the specific frames that I wanted in that case. Hopefully that worked and you can see what I meant. But when you get to the proper frame you want, all I have to do is just hit, in this case, the Windows prompt and print screen will give you, capture the image that you may want to have. All right. And this is another actually short video when this bird took off to go fishing. I got it in there and did a screen capture of that as well. So these are some of the new technologies. It's gotten much easier to get great photos. We can utilize still point and shoot cameras. Micro Four Thirds are becoming incredibly more popular. I would say more so than larger DSLRs, but we can also use those behind the spotting scopes. But I concentrated mostly on phones today because candidly, that's what I use. And it is by far the most popular style of digiscoping out there right now, because everyone's always carrying your phone. You've always got your phone on you, right? You know, it's right there. So right in your pocket, it's very simple to pull that out. The other nice thing in the world of COVID and with these larger phones is you can put that phone on there, get your subject in there, and in the land of COVID in particular and social distancing and whatnot, it's pretty easy for people to come up and look at the screen of a phone. It's also a great tool for children, because children very often have a very difficult time, it seems, getting lined right up on the eyepiece of a spotting scope like this. You know, they kind of can't seem to get their head in just the right spot to be able to see well through there. But with a phone on there, with the picture being shown, or better yet, even maybe a tablet, one of the newer things we'll be seeing later this year is screen share, near field screen share, to be able to screen share from a phone directly to a tablet, which could be mounted to the leg of your tripod, you know, and then allow people to be able to see that more effectively. So that's what some of the things that we're working on and that you'll be seeing soon. I don't see any questions. Oh, here's a couple coming in. All right. Does binocular digiscoping work well? Okay, so yes and no. Binocular digiscoping is a little difficult. It's much easier with an adapter, obviously. Without an adapter, it's almost impossible, because now you're trying to track a bird, move the binocular around and focus with one hand. In the other hand, you're trying to maintain this three-dimensional spot behind the eyepiece while manipulating the phone controls at the same time. So it's almost impossible to do. You get a lot of shake with binoculars, but you can get quite good images as well at times. I find it's not near as effective as the scope, and it's probably due to the fact that I'm bouncing around a lot more. The one thing about any digiscoping system, and I should have mentioned this earlier, is the quality of your images is going to be limited by the weakest link in your system, be it your tripod, be it your adapter, be it your phone camera, or camera in particular, or the actual optical device you're shooting through. As I said before, we have $350 spotting scopes up to $3,150. And you can get all of those through the Freeport Wild Bird Supply. I think they're doing a small discount for folks during the festival. You can ask about that. But the $350 scope is still going to give you similar power of magnification but it's just not going to have the resolution and the ability to draw as much detail as the high quality glass, which is more expensive in the high end. So again, you know, the optical device you're shooting is going to dictate a lot of that as well. The small palm scopes, okay, you just mentioned. Actually, glad you mentioned that. The little 550 scope with the fluoride that we have normally is $17.99. We're actually running a promo through mid-May on those, and they can be picked up at $14.99. It's the first time they've ever been on special, so that's a really good deal. Again, you can inquire at Freeport Wild Bird or any of our other dealers. Thanks, Denise. All right, what else we got here? Andy, what why would you try to digiscope in given a choice? So Andy, yeah, digiscoping, of course, we already talked about vibration. The least amount of wind you could have is always the best. But, you know, even in a big blow, you know, you do what you got to do. There's ways to combat wind, and the easiest way is to keep your tripod lower. The last thing you want to do really is to raise up that center column if you can avoid that at all. When the scope is seated low, you're going to have less wind resistance and less of the legs exposed to vibrate. Carbon fiber tripods do a better job at that because they absorb motion or vibration rather than transmit it like an aluminum or metal tripod. And that's one of the reasons that angled scopes are preferred by birding in particular. It's almost 90+% angled scopes because you can keep it lower. So when we're going out as a group, you can, in sharing a scope, you know, at different heights, it's very easy for the taller person to bow gently at the waist compared to trying to get below, you know, a straight through scope eyepiece design that usually would have to be higher. Okay. That's done. A picture of the little scope. Yeah, we can do that. Give me a second. Have you ever tried to share what you were seeing live? Yes. I've done that a lot, actually, Kathy. If you stalk me on Facebook, just Jeff Bouton. I've done a number of the Facebook Live events. The problem with that really is, though, that many of these streaming services really restrict the resolution and don't do justice to the end video. So I prefer shooting and then maybe putting the video on, say, YouTube or something after the fact, because when you're doing a live stream, it always, you know, greatly reduces the quality of the imagery. So it's sort of a double-edged sword. Yeah, and there are a lot of people doing that, you know, these sort of virtual tours as far as, you know, virtually sharing walks. I know Atlanta Audubon's done a lot of those, but, you know, what you get in those is kind of sketchy. That's one of the things that our team has been working on, kind of giving the highest quality live birding experiences you can, but it is a crapshoot unless you're going to go to a spot that you know it's just a slam dunk with a lot of birds. Okay. So let me see, Denise asked if there's a picture of the small scope I can share. Let me see if I can't find that quickly. Okay. Had one in there, but here we go. So let me share this for you, just give you an idea of what we're talking about. Share screen, this photo. So there you are. That's the 550 scope series. The 553 has the angled eyepiece, 554 is the straight through. And it's a 55mm, still has the dual focus. It's the Pro Monaro with the fluoride crystal. So the resolution is extremely high. Has the highest magnification of any of what we call these compact scopes. And it's won every single independent review it's ever been in, is the highest quality compact scope, and often outperforms non-compact scopes, like full-size scopes as well. Like I said, the Audubon review had this as the best scope in their review under $2,000, including some with 80mm objectives. So yeah, it's quite a performer. Okay, we'll stop that share. And I think that's all the questions. I thank everybody for tuning in today. Let me come. Good timing here. We're wrapping up in just about an hour. I thank you again for having me. If you have further questions, feel free to reach out to me. You can get me at customer service at kowa.com, or my name, Jeff.Bouton at kowa.com. We also have a full suite of resources online on our repository at our the Kowa Sporting Optics user page on YouTube. It has almost 200 different videos, including past webinars and product videos showing how to use videos. And in particular, we get a ton of digiscoping stuff there. Thank you, Andy. I appreciate you saying so. Hopefully everyone learned anything. If you have any questions, feel free, again, to reach out to us. If you don't remember how to reach me, you can always talk to our friends at Freeport Wild Bird Supply, and they'll be happy to get you in touch with me as well. So thanks again. I hope everyone has a great day. I hope the migration is picking up rapidly for y'all, and look forward to seeing you in person next time.